What if I told you that this poker player literally peeked at his opponent's cards, kicked other players under the table, and won over $17,000 in just one night? That sounds insane, right? Because that's exactly what one man thought he could get away with during a session of Hustler Casino Live. And listen, this wasn't some tiny misstep or one shady move slipped under the radar. This was a full-on train wreck caught in 4K. A cheating scandal so ridiculous it ended with one of the harshest bans in livestream poker history. And you won't believe how it all went down until the end of the video. If you've never seen Hustler Casino Live, it's a slick room in Los Angeles with cameras everywhere, commentators with microphones, and a poker table that might as well be a stage on Broadway. Every hand gets broadcast to thousands of fans at home, with whole cards revealed on screen so you know exactly who's bluffing and who's trapped. The players, or characters as they're referred to, are a mix of millionaires flexing, grinders trying to prove themselves, and trash talkers keeping the table loose.
I was calling. I knew you were gonna fucking fire, bro. I was like, please, I'm gonna call this motherfucker no matter.
Not only for the cards, but also for the personalities and the "I can't believe he just called that" kind of moments. And on this particular night of February 2nd, 2022, the stakes weren't life-changing, but they were big enough to sting. We're talking blinds in the hundreds, pots easily stretching into the thousands. The kind of game where one bad move could mean kissing your bankroll goodbye. Trust me, I've been close myself. Anyways, on one side of the table was Barry Wallace, an esteemed regular with a calm, steady presence, the type of guy who doesn't tilt easily. Early on, he was doing what he does best, stacking chips, reading situations, and slowly building a lead. The commentators even hinted that he looked like he was going to own the night. And he probably might have, if only he wasn't sitting across from the embodiment of mischief himself, Julio Cedillo. You see, Cedillo was the unsuspecting newbie on the table. To the other players, he was just an unknown guy that went by the nickname Skills Rocks online, which, honestly, is already kind of a red flag. I mean, come on, if someone's username sounds like it was picked after a couple of beers, you don't exactly expect them to reinvent the game. Speaking of the game, Hustlers games are cash, no-limit hold'em, which means you bet on real money and, on the other hand, you can push all in and potentially win or lose your entire stack. There's basically no cap on how much you can bet in a single move. As I mentioned earlier, the audience watches hole cards and reactions, so the feeling is intimate and raw. Every twitch, every blink can be noticed by viewers and commentators alike. That transparency is part of the general appeal, but it is also a vulnerability factor because when you put cameras on the table, you suddenly magnify every small angle that might exist. Barry began to take control early in the session. He won a few pots cleanly, stacked chips with casual efficiency, and the odds started to lean toward him. There was a soft, growing tension at the table because whenever one player starts pulling ahead, others begin to tighten up and bets change. That dynamic is what makes these streams kind of addictive, a slow build into the drama that would soon unfold.
And his bluffs, the queen 10 had a little.
As the game started, Julio Cedillo sat back in his chair doing that casual lean you've probably seen 100 times at poker tables. At first, nobody thought much of him. They thought he was just another seat filler, another player trying to make a name for himself on the biggest stage livestream poker has to offer. But here's the thing, poker is a game built on trust. You trust the dealer, you trust the deck, and most of all, you trust that the guy across the table isn't literally peeking at your cards. Because once that trust is broken, the whole experience crumbles like a deck of cards. Yes, pun intended. And on this very table, the cards were definitely crumbling faster than even the commentators could see. Because hidden behind Cedillo's something was brewing. Viewers didn't see it yet, the players didn't feel it yet. But in just a few hands, this poker-faced newbie was about to blow up the entire session in a way nobody saw coming. Imagine sitting at this table. Would you have noticed what was about to happen, or would you have brushed it off like everyone else did at first? I'm very curious if any of you guys have experienced this yourself, so please let me know in the comments. And let's be honest, haven't we all had the temptation to look at the neighbor's cards? Everyone has that human tendency to fidget, even though Cedillo took this too far. And everything was about to blow up in minutes. It started with the sunglasses. You know how poker players wear shades to hide their eyes? Well, Cedillo had them sliding down his nose just at the right angle. Not to look cool, nor to see the cards better, but to sneak those quick peeks. The tilt of his head and the way his eyes darted It was the kind of body language you'd expect from a student glancing at his neighbor's exam. Except here, the exam was Barry's hole cards. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. I mean, just take a look at this. In every big hand that was played, you'd notice him leaning in. Cedillo would stretch forward like he was just getting comfortable, but the timing was always too perfect. Right as an opponent picked up their cards, suddenly he had a reason to adjust his chair. Right as someone hesitated a little, boom, and his eyes would flick down, then back up. And then came his plays, with several instant decisions that were just too reckless to count. He'd call or fold without that normal poker pause.
Yeah. Whoa.
He's all in blind.
Whoa.
You know, the one where players pretend to think while they're really just calculating odds in their heads. Cedillo skipped all that. He would glance, react, and slam chips forward like a man who already knew the ending to the movie. But here's the thing. Poker is a cruel game. Even when you know what someone's holding, variance has no mercy. And that's what made Cedillo's whole act look even more ridiculous. There were hands where he peeked, acted all confident, and still got crushed by the river. It's like watching someone copy answers on a test, only to discover the kid they copied from was wrong. It was just embarrassing and sloppy, and in front of thousands of people. The players didn't say anything to begin with. The commentators didn't either. And honestly, if you were watching live, you probably would have brushed it off too. Poker players move around in their seat all the time, but Cedillo's glance had purpose. And worst of all, he wasn't trying to hide the fact he was peeking. He was trying to act like it was all part of the game. And if you think the first moments at the table looked like a one-off slip, what came next made it clear. This guy wasn't playing poker. He was trying to fool the whole room. Instead of playing it cool, Cedillo piled on the trash talk, the classic textbook distraction technique. He would needle Barry, poke at other players, and laugh a little too hard at his own jokes.
And he's gonna dump it all in one hand. This is how much of a G I am.
You could almost feel him trying to create noise so nobody would focus on what he was actually doing. But all it did was make him stick out even more like a sore thumb. And then came the moment that made it so obvious something was off. The kick. The hand started with the player on the right of Cedillo, called Antonio, who raised to $1,200, and both Cedillo and Barry called. The flop comes, ace 7-9, and Antonio flops a pair. Cedillo flopped 2 pair, and Barry flopped an open-ended straight draw. Yikes, that's an action flop. Antonio then bets out $1,000 and receives 2 quickest calls I've ever seen. The turn came a 6, meaning Barry now has a straight. Barry and Cedillo both check, and while Antonio is about to bet, Cedillo kicks Antonio under the table, trying to signal him to stop betting. What a Anyways, moving on. Antonio ignores Cedillo and fires another $2,400 into the pot. He even says, "Why are you hitting my foot?"
No, I really got...
Are y'all kicking each other?
No, I'm moving my fucking foot.
Yeah, that's bad news for Cedillo. When it's Cedillo's turn to act, everyone expected him to rip it all in. I mean, he's got 2 pair, a very strong hand on this board. He then puts on the most cringe acting performance I've ever seen and ended up folding. All while this is happening, Barry is getting suspicious. He is saying things like, "Why are you guys kicking each other under the table? And now, you folding?" The hand ended with Barry and Antonio all in, and Barry, of course, winning with a straight. Barry then gets up saying, "Whatever you just did, not cool."
Whatever you did, whatever y'all said.
I turned it into a bluff and I had an ace.
And then walks away from the table for a bit. He obviously knows something is up. Commentators were just as shocked as the viewers and began to feel something was off. And then Cedillo made everything worse. Instead of letting Barry cool off, Cedillo grabbed his 2 cards he folded from the table, jumped out of his chair, and chased him towards the door. He held the cards up like it was some kind of joke. I mean, the worst part is that he left the table with 2 cards from the deck, then returned, and the deck wasn't even changed. Come on, how unprofessional is that?
I don't know.
Now, maybe that sort of move flies in a home game with your buddies, but this was Hustler Casino Live. Thousands of people were watching. Real money was on the line, and Cedillo was acting like a kid pulling a prank in gym class. The booth went quiet at first, then tried to cover with small talk, but you could hear the awkwardness. You could almost hear them thinking, "Is this guy serious? Did he really just do that?" At this point, you might have been tempted to say, "Okay, maybe this was just a one-time weird moment." But poker isn't a game where you get the benefit of the doubt. When someone shows you who they are at the table, you better believe them. And Cedillo was about to show everyone exactly what he was doing. But before we get there, quick question. If you were Barry, would you have made a bigger deal out of it at the table? Well, hit that subscribe if yes, because even if you don't play poker, something similar might spring up on you any day. Now, if you've ever watched a live poker stream, you know the chat is brutal and the wild audience doesn't miss a thing. Immediately they noticed the absurdity, and viewers started clipping moments in real time. The glances, the kicks, and Cedillo's quick folds. The commentators, too, were in a tough spot themselves. You could hear the unease in their voices.
Oh, you did not. You had a rough night. You really didn't.
They weren't outright calling him out, because imagine accusing someone of cheating live on air, with money on the table. But they weren't blind either. Their tone shifted. Their laughs sounded strained. At one point, one of them let a long pause hang in the air after Cedillo made a suspicious move.
Call 540.
It was the kind of silence that says everything without saying anything. And think about how the other players must have felt. You're sitting there with thousands of dollars in play, trying to keep your focus, only to realize the guy across from you might not just be lucky. The kind of paranoia that eats at you. Some probably hoped they were imagining things. Others maybe didn't want to blow up the game midstream. And here's what makes it even more absurd. Cedillo wasn't smooth about it. He wasn't some genius cheater who fooled everyone for months. He was reckless and sloppy. And worst of all, he did it on one of the most watched poker streams in the world. It's like trying to rob a bank while live streaming on Instagram. By the end of the night, viewers were furious. The booth was rattled, and other players were left shaking their heads. And when the session finally ended, that's when the real storm began. But quick thought for you. If you'd spotted this live, would you have blown it up on social media or sat back and let Hustler Casino handle it? Within minutes, clips of the stream were bouncing across Twitter, Reddit, and poker forums. People were screen grabbing his every move, slowing down the footage frame by frame, and circling his tilted glasses. Watching the replay felt less like a poker highlight and more like an episode of CSI. After the game, a Cards Chat report at the time revealed Hustler Casino didn't waste time announcing Cedillo's infinite ban, and the wording was clear. Done, finished, out. It was the kind of quick decision that told players, we'll protect this game with no hesitation. Reactions across the poker world came in waves. Some pros laughed at how clumsy Cedillo had been. They joked he was the worst cheater they'd ever seen, a guy who managed to get caught in the most obvious way possible. Others weren't laughing though. To them, this wasn't just one goofy guy getting reckless. It was a reminder of how unpredictable livestream poker really is. Remember, these shows aren't just entertainment. They're a window into poker for thousands of casual fans. People tune in to see bluffs, big pots, and crazy hero talks. They want the chaos, but they also want the chaos to be real. Cedillo's antics turned that into theater. And if one guy could do it so blatantly, you start wondering who else might be pulling smaller angles under the radar. Even regular fans started asking, how do we know this game we're watching is real? That's the kind of doubt you don't want living in your audience's head. And then there's Barry's perspective. Imagine sitting down, stacking your chips, planning to grind, and then realizing halfway through the session that someone isn't competing. They're cutting corners. It hits harder than losing money. Money you can win back, but trust you can't. As for Cedillo, his reputation was roasted. He'll never outrun the label the Hustler Cheater. Google his name, and that's all that pops up. No future stream appearances will ever erase that night. The fallout was brutal and instant, but it also raised bigger questions. Hustler had banned him, sure, but should that have been the end of it? Or does the poker world need something stronger, like a blacklist, a scarlet letter, or a permanent seat ban across every major card room? The fallout from Julio Cedillo's stunt didn't just stain his name. It forced livestream poker to stare down an uncomfortable truth. Hustler Casino Live, already one of the most watched poker streams in the world, moved quickly after the scandal. Producers slowly adjusted camera angles, tightened security around the seat, and rethought seating arrangements so that players could no longer get those accidental peeks. But the damage was bigger than one player, because barely 7 months later, the poker world would be rattled again by the Robbie Jade Lujan in September of that same year. Her accusations of cheating split the community in half. To date, we still aren't sure if she was framed or not. If you guys want me to make a video about it, let me know in the comments. However, Cedillo's case was less mysterious, landing like fuel on a fire. If someone could blatantly cheat on stream in front of thousands, what did that say about the hands nobody caught? Poker.org summed it up in a headline: integrity on the line. Livestream poker faces its weakest moment. The repercussions were permanent for Julio Cedillo. He wasn't just removed from Hustler. His name became shorthand for the clumsiest form of poker cheating. Memes circulated calling him the Hustler cheater, and some pros mocked the absurdity of chasing Barry with his two folded cards. The community remains split. Some are of the opinion that scandals, ironically, bring more eyeballs to the game. Others warn that they poison as well, making casual viewers skeptical of everything they see. One thing's certain, poker only works when trust exists. The moment someone starts peeking, the game isn't poker anymore. And if you want more insane poker stories like this, the kind that make you shake your head in disbelief, subscribe now, because trust me, this won't be the last scandal.